All right, this is a video on the midpoint of segments in a coordinate plane. So if you take a look at this picture right here that we've got, and if I wanted to figure out the midpoint of that line segment PQ there, it's going to be somewhere in this region right here, like halfway between the 2 points. But we talked a little bit about a little bit about this with distance. Counting on a diagonal line is a little bit tricky because we kind of land somewhere in the in between areas. But if we think about this conceptually, then the midpoint is going to be in the middle of the x values and the middle of the y values. The coordinates for that middle should be the middle of the 2 points. So if you think about it in terms of halfway between the x's, 6 and 0, halfway between the x's is going to be 3. And if you think about it in terms of halfway between the the y's, 3 and 0, that's going to be 1.5. So that means that your midpoint is going to be at 3, 1.5, which is right here. So the idea of halfway between the x's and halfway between the y's is an important idea, finding the midpoint of a segment. Now, doing this over and over and over and over and over again allows us to figure out a formula to help us do this without even having to look at a graph. Okay, so take a look at my next example. So that formula that we were talking about is right here below, and the idea that we would take the middle of the x's and the middle of the y's is exactly what's going on. If you take a look at that formula down here, it's literally the average of the x's, add them up, divide by 2, and the average of the y's, add them up, divide by 2. And it's the middle of the x's and the middle of the y's. So keep in mind that the midpoint of a line segment is a point. It's not one number, it's an x and a y value because it's a point. And now line segments are the only things that have midpoints, not lines, not just distance in general, but an actual line segment is what you can find the midpoint of. It needs to be the middle of something. And it needs to be something that's definite, not something that keeps on going forever. That's why lines don't have a midpoint. So let's talk about how we would use this formula. Now, we could do what we did with the middle of the x's and the middle of the y's. The middle of the x's, 4 to 12, that's 8 units apart. So half of that would be 4 units. So it looks like 8 would be the middle of the x's if I do it like that. 1 to 9 is 8 units, so 4 more would be 5. So 8, 5 is what we suspect the midpoint should be. So let's check and see if this formula works the same way. So my average of my x's, 4 plus 12 divided by 2. And then the average of my y's, 1 plus 9 divided by 2. Okay? So 4 plus 12 is 16. Still need to divide by 2. 1 plus 9 is 10. 10, and I still need to divide by 2. So my last step, 16 divided by 2 is 8, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So I've got my new coordinates of my midpoint, 8 and 5, just like what we thought it should be up here. And the formula works brilliantly. So I don't even have to look at the graph. I don't even have to look at the points. And there's certainly no counting happening. I could just find the average of the x's and the average of the y's. Okay, so that's going to be our midpoint. And if you want to think about it conceptually in terms of the middle of the x's and the middle of the y's, that's fine. Or you can use this formula. Let's do a couple of examples together with you here, okay? Now, a little bit of a notation thing. When you see BC jammed together, literally what that means is BC would be the distance between B and C, all right? The midpoint is going to be of segment BC. So, I'm thinking about something in terms of, something that would look like that on a coordinate plane. And then the coordinates are right up here. So negative 2, 8 are my coordinates for B. And for C, negative 4, negative 6 would be my coordinates. So I would just graph this on a coordinate plane, and it definitely, I think I got my points backwards there. But finding the midpoint wouldn't be as much an issue. So let me just real quick for eyeball purposes fix that up real fast. C would be down here as it's -4, -6. And then B would be up here at -2, +8. All right. That just looks a little bit better. All right, so now we'll just find the midpoint. So we'll find the average of the x's, -4 plus -2 divided by 2. And that's going to be my new x value. Then I'll find the average of my y's, -6 plus 8 divided by 2. And that'll be my new y value. Super important. Okay, so here you go. -4 plus -2 is -6. Still need to divide by 2. -6 plus 8 is +2. Still need to divide by 2. -6 divided by 2 is -3. That's my new x value of my midpoint. And 2 over 2 is 1. That's my new y value. So the midpoint of BC, -3, 1. Okay, so that's how I would do midpoint for this. I could still find distance and I can find midpoint of whatever the 2 points that they give me are, but you just use the coordinates and you can just figure out what that is, either using the middle of the x's and the middle of the y's or use our formula that does the average. Okay, do your practice. Good luck.